Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's begin with an acknowledgement of country. And I'm so thrilled to welcome Georgia Stuart, who's a Year 10 student, here she is, from Pymble Ladies College. Take it away, please, Georgia.
Yama gubi nangu gane. Naegi nangu duram. Yama yamare nergailade. Yama yalagiru walaga nale waduna. Iani ginda yanada. Malinige gamilare winagaya. Hello, welcome to all. I would like to acknowledge the past, the present, the traditional owners of the land that you are on today, particularly my Gamilaraay elders. My name is Georgia and I am on an AEF scholarship at Pymble. I live at Narrabri, which is a 6-hour drive from Sydney. For 9,000 generations, the people of this land have lived alongside our Mother Earth. We only took what we needed when we needed it. We communicated and traded throughout nations, but in a way that was directly beneficial to each person in that mob. We turned what is now seen as disasters, such as droughts and floods, into something that could be used to refresh and replenish the land. Each year, 10% of Australia's mined coal is cleaned and then stored away, never to be touched again. Annually, 7.6 million tonnes of food produced on Australia's farms is wasted. The erosion of soil has occurred due to lack of minerals and nutrients from the introduction of pesticides, extreme floods and droughts, overproduction of the land, and the use of crops that are not native. There are certain mines in the Gunnedah Coal Basin of where I live that have been charged with the theft of water, polluting the air and water, illegally dumping waste, the illegal clearing of native bushland, and allowing extremely toxic chemicals that have been buried under the ground for millions of years to be released along with coal dust and blow onto surrounding properties. There are earthquakes in my area due to underground disruption from the mining, and lymphatic and lung cancers have increased due to higher rates of carcinogenics in the air from things like crop dusters. In my short lifetime, I've also lived the worst drought in over a century. In these 7 years, I saw the native Murray cod wash up along the dry riverbanks. Dust storms rolled over almost daily, and we had to sell all of our cattle. But some couldn't even afford to do that, so they had to shoot them. This drive for money and for power has introduced along floods, fire and famine, and the extinction of 66 native species has occurred since colonisation because of these changes to the natural climate. My people may not be able to fully support our current and future society, but by teaching our leaders how to live with nature instead of taking from it, hopefully we will enable a world where people don't have to have their livelihoods destroyed because of the exhaustion of our Mother Earth.
Georgia, thank you so much. Is there more you would like to say for your acknowledgement, or is that it now?
I think that's it.
That was so good. Can I encourage everybody to clap using deaf sign clapping? I'm deeply affected by what you've said. Thank you. You've given us so many reasons there why you support the school strike for climate, but could I focus in on what you observed with the drought in Narrabri in northwestern New South Wales? What was it that really ripped your heart out from what you saw?
I think you just watched everywhere outside and it was just brown. The sky was brown, the ground, it wasn't even a nice brown. And it just kind of, it brought the mood down for everyone in the area.
And is it your fundamental fear that unless climate change is addressed, you're going to see more droughts?
Yeah, and I don't want that. It was really sad.
Well, look, I just want to thank you so much for being the first but not the last young person who's teaching me how to live my life. So again, thank you very much, and I hope we'll see you later in our forum. I'd like to invite Michael to join the conversation, Michael Ramadama, and you've been involved in school strikes, including in preparing for church worship. You know, why are you involved? When we spoke briefly, you said God is love, God is just, and what's happening to our peoples and our land is unjust. Speak to that. Your faith is critical in this, isn't it?
Indeed. Thanks, Julie. Yes, my participation in these climate strikes is based on those two. Plus, the God I serve and the Jesus I follow gives hope. God is just, God is love, and God gives hope. Those three things is what I want to follow, that I live justly, extend love, and brings hope to people that are suffering.
And this young woman and all these students we're going to hear, they're crying out for help. And the people of Fiji, where you are associated, are crying out too. And you believe we have a duty as Christians to be good Samaritans. Is that right?
Yes, indeed. I'm actually reminded about that parable of the Good Samaritan in the Gospel of Luke. That's a conversation Jesus had with an expert of the law, who will inherit eternal life. Love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. The same conversation Jesus had with the Pharisees, and saying, the first is as great as the second. It will be hypocritical for us to say that we love God and do not love our neighbor alike. So, for us, that Good Samaritan, I see us, the Pacific Island people, as the people that are suffering. We are being robbed, stripped of our clothes, and are left there dying. Is the Australian government just going to walk past us, or they are the very ones robbing us of our identity?
Because I understand that in your community of Fiji, 4 villages have had to relocate, and that you understand that over an estimated 80 plus are at risk of relocation. Can you explain the significance of that in relation to climate change, and also what's on your birth certificate?
Our birth certificate, if I may start with that, it talks about, it mentions our family unit, our clan, our province, our district, our province. It tells of who we are, our identity. And for those that have to relocate, we think about, are we inheriting a new identity? If we had to leave, what's going to appear in our children's birth certificate in the future? Or, come a time we'll just point out and say, yes, that's where your dad's from. I actually talked with my maths teacher early this morning. She said my mother's village was one of the 4. They had to relocate, but not all have relocated, because some are just finding it hard to leave behind their ancestral burial grounds, their childhood memories, and so many things.
And so is your fear that if we don't address climate change, communities will lose their land, but also their ancestral burial grounds, to some degree their identity? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, not just for Fiji, but for other Pacific Island countries as well, such as Tuvalu, Kiribati, to mention the list.
You have a vision in your mind, don't you? A sort of a picture of the water. Could you tell us about that picture? And I think overnight you wrote a poem. If you could share that with us.
Yes, this is titled I Am. It talks about, when we identify ourselves, I am Fiji, and I am this, I am that. So the title is I Am, and the impacts of sea level rise that affects our identity. I am. The tide sweeps in to the toes of I am, to the ankles of I am. There is a foreboding presence. What is that? I am asks. Wind whispers in the far off trees. I am feels and notices change. The foam now reaches the calves of I am. A tide mark left on the knees. I am serves for help. It keeps rising to the thighs and hips. I am shouts. A heavy swell on the chest of I am. Seawater flows into the heart. Cries remain unheard. Tongue tastes brine, a taste of my tears. Hands of I am reaches the air, but who will notice? On a dead zone, I am waves goodbye. I am what once was.
What can you say? Thank you. It is just so deeply so. And I'm not going to comment. I'm going to let that hang in the air, uncomfortable. But if I could ask to join us from the audience, Alison Overeem, who's a Palawa woman from southeastern Tasmania, a leading member of the Uniting Aboriginal and Islander Christian Congress. And she has a very long history of working with children, young people and families. If we could all welcome Alison with a clap, and if you could turn your mic on, Alison. Do you want to respond to that poem you've just heard before I ask you a question?
Welcome everybody, and welcome to the traditional homelands of the Moanina people, the lands we must heal together, walk on together and protect together. Absolutely, Michael. What a beautiful, calling for us to see creation as not separate to who we are and what our identity is, and to weave those stories together. So thank you, brother. That interwoven message is something that I've got some young people's artwork behind me here that says heal country, and healing country is about healing ourselves and healing our identity as well. Thanks, Julie.
Could I ask for the next photo to be put up, please, because it's a picture of Alison in Fiji, and as it comes up, if you could just explain, you're the person in the middle, who are these women and why are you there in Fiji? What's it all about?
I would say that it was absolutely life-changing. So as a representative of the Uniting Aboriginal Islander Christian Congress, the heart of the Uniting Church of Australia, I was nominated to go to the President's Conference in Fiji for all creation. I was moved by the young people in the village. I was moved by the guest speakers, but particularly moved by Reverend James Bhagwan. And we now, as the Uniting Aboriginal Islander Christian Congress, in partnering with the Pacific Island churches, that it wasn't a calling that we should do this, is we need to do this. First Peoples, brothers and sisters in Australia, and our Pacific Islander brothers and sisters, there's something that weaves us together. So this photo is two beautiful friends of mine, so Uniting Church ministers in Australia, and one from Fiji. And
and can I just say, as my understanding is, as well as partnering between First Nations people, you believe partnering with Second Nations people, and I must admit, Alison, I'd never heard that expression, Second Nations people, before, but you believe this partnership is everything, that these young people, like our Ella who's spoken, you think more power to their arm. I think your exact words to me were, keep doing what you're doing, but don't do it alone. What is your call to the young people who are watching us in terms of involving you?
I think that it's a call also to, you don't have to do this alone. If we're caring for all of creation, and we're, our love of the Creator cares us to care for each other, it's intergenerational, it's interwoven, it's First and Second Peoples walking together in Australia, and First and Second Peoples walking with our younger people through and in the messages of not just care for each other, but through that care for each other comes the care for creation. We need to heal country. Yeah. We're running out of time.
That urgency, I know you feel strongly, but you said the Creator was present on this land long before the big boat came.
Amen. Amen. Amen, Julie.
Tell us what Congress is, because not everybody knows what that is. What's the critical role of Congress in the church?
Absolutely. So the Uniting Aboriginal Islander Christian Congress is part of the Uniting Churches covenanting towards First Peoples, and the recognition of First Peoples as sovereign owners of this country. What an amazing church to be part of. So in that is the story of First Peoples. So Congress is about faith and community building through an Indigenous lens, through a faith lens that speaks to our storylines and our song lines, but it's also about advocacy. It's about advocacy because we're given the responsibility as the caretakers of this land. So weaving those stories and that advocacy through the Uniting Church is what we call, Julie, walking together as First and Second Peoples in covenanting. We can do this.
Look, thank you so much. And if I could ask Lilliani Tahaafe-Williams to join us. She's joining us from Darwin. Hello, lovely to see you there. I thought I'd bring you on. I'll just quickly say that Lilliani is a PhD candidate at Charles Darwin University, a member of the Uniting Church in Australia Assembly Standing Committee, and her field is international development, and she's a graduate from the Graduate Institute of International Development Studies in Geneva, which is just so fabulous. So welcome to you. I think you have a Tongan background and grew up in Britain and studied in Switzerland, so you're a true international woman. But I know you're involved with the global movement, and if I could ask our team backstage to pop your picture up, how would you respond to that anxiety question? Because people are worried about worrying their kids. What do you think?
I agree that it's more helpful for us to raise awareness on these issues rather than to remain ignorant or to lack the information to make positive contributions to these issues for our future. It's helpful to inform our children or our young people that things aren't a fairy tale, and so there are solutions and we can be a part of it. And so parallel, I participated in a global multi-faith grassroots action launched by Green Faith International Networks to sound the alarm on the climate emergency, which is where this photo was taken. It is the only photo I have of myself participating in anything, because I work very hard to avoid the camera by working behind the scenes and being the photographer and videographer. And in that moment, I was just showing off some of the 10 demands. I like to use commandments, but it's demands, that the multi-faith and global ecumenical movement want to present to COP26, which is happening in Glasgow this year. And that photo was taken in March. So.
Can I ask you, you mentioned that marvellous Freudian slip there where you said the 10 commandments instead of the 10 demands, which tells us you are a person of faith. And can you just tell us a little bit more about the connection between your faith and your deep interest in First Nations spirituality and your support for this kind of climate action?
Sure. So echoing from what Michael was saying, I believe in a God of justice, peace and love, and that motivates me to contribute to and support efforts for a more equitable, sustainable and just human existence. In this way, my access to graduate education can be a useful tool for me to promote alternative systems of sustainable living that have existed for thousands of years, inherited and multi-generational local knowledge, as Alison was saying, if valued and used as a resource, could become a lifeline to humanity and all life on Earth. So in this context, when we talk about Indigenous spirituality, I'm defining it as a worldview that acknowledges the interconnectedness and interdependence of all life on Earth. So for thousands of years, terrestrial and aquatic ecoregions have thrived and continue to survive under the stewardship of our world's Indigenous peoples, who continue to bear the brunt and are at the front lines of the climate crisis. So my PhD research shows that dominant Western systems of governance and societal progress is driven by economic growth. Economic growth is inherently ecocidal, exploitative to human beings and the environment, and unsustainable. So just to end, because I know I'm talking a bit too much, to me, the School Strike for Climate strives for an Australia that respects the interconnectedness and interdependence of all life on Earth for the sake of our combined futures. In our Australian context, while we continue to put pressure on our politicians, I believe those platforms are also opportunities to promote and acknowledge the wealth of knowledge of the First Nations peoples in these lands now called Australia. So our gatherings, because the climate crisis isn't an issue in and of itself in the vacuum. It is also an opportunity for truth telling, and I'll end with that. Thank you.
So please, if we could indicate that is magnificently put.
So we have a question: what can uniting church congregations do to build relationships with First Nations people and the Uaicc to ensure that their voices are heard in climate justice conversations?
Alison, can you leap back on? Alison from Tasmania, please.
I don't think we've got 5 days, but I can give you a little snapshot there. And it really is about that integral thing about building relationships. Who's the local mob? Who are they? Whose country is it? Who are you walking with? And a big thing for me is whose land does that congregation sit on? And it's telling the stories that sit under the layers of the building. And us as the Uniting Aboriginal Islander Christian Congress, putting ourselves out there a bit more too, to bring other people in the stories. So we've just got to heal country together. That's what the artwork says behind me, and that's what we need to do. And we can do that by building relationships.
Thank you so much, Sis. That was such a big question. That was a magnificent answer.